Explosions have rocked the Syrian capital, Damascus, hitting an area near the city's international airport. Syria's state news agency says the blasts are the result of Israeli airstrikes. Our correspondent Lizzie Phelan reports now from Damascus.
Residents this morning here in Damascus were awoken by the sounds of those huge blasts near the Damascus International Airport that's used for both civilian and military purposes. Now, almost immediately there was widespread speculation that Israel was behind the attack. That's been all but confirmed by Israel's intelligence minister.
I can confirm that the incident in Syria corresponds completely with Israel's policy to act to prevent Iran's smuggling of advanced weapons via Syria to Hezbollah in Iran. Naturally, I don't want to elaborate on this.
Back in 2015, Israel was also accused of an attack close to Damascus International Airport. The country has also been behind several attacks on Syrian bases, including one here in the Mazeh military air base in Damascus, as well as another attack on an air base in Homs last month. Now, Reuters, citing a regional intelligence source, says that the Israelis were hitting an Iranian ammunition depot used to supply Israel's arch enemy in the region, the armed Lebanese group Hezbollah, which is also one of the Syrian government's most effective allies. They're fighting on several fronts in Syria against ISIL and other extremist anti-government groups. Now, back to who was behind that attack. It's highly unlikely that rebels would have been able to pull this off. The last time that they reached this area was in 2013 when they shelled the Damascus International Airport. As of now, still no information as to the extent of the damage caused by that attack or whether there were any casualties. Of course, as soon as we have that information, we'll bring you the latest right here on RT from Damascus.
Our correspondent in Jerusalem, Paula Sleer, has more on the Israeli reaction to the incident.
Well, these comments from the Israeli intelligence minister, where he basically says that these strikes are consistent with Israeli policy, are widely being understood here in Israel and certainly in the international community as an admission of responsibility by the Israelis for these strikes in the early hours of Thursday morning. Now, we have heard in the past from the Israelis that every time they feel that weapons are being transferred from Syria to Lebanon, they feel justified in carrying out strikes inside Syria. This is what the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had to say.
I've made it clear that regarding Syria, Israel has no objection to an agreement on Syria, but we strongly oppose the possibility that in such an agreement, Iran and its proxies will maintain a military presence in Syria. I think these things were made as clear as possible. Our policy is consistent. When we identify attempts to transfer advanced weapons to Hezbollah, and we have the intelligence and the means, we act to prevent it. This is what we have done before, and this is what we will continue to do. We are firmly determined to do so, and everyone should take this into consideration.
Now, those comments were made back in March, which was the most serious incident to date between Israel and Syria. There was also another comment that was made by a high-ranking IDF officer, also extremely rare because Israel's official position is to remain neutral in terms of what's going on in Syria. And the officer basically admitted that the Israelis had destroyed and targeted some 100 Syrian missiles. The Syrian response was to deploy its air defense systems and also fire a number of missiles towards Israel. Now, the Israeli response in turn was that the country's defense minister said that if they do that again, Israel will basically destroy Syria. Syria saying that this was a game changer. At the time, some of the debris fell as far away as in Jordan. Israel is understood to have carried out a number of strikes in Syria over the years since the war there began some 6 years ago. But the official policy here is not to deny, neither to confirm, and Israel consistently maintaining that it remains neutral vis-a-vis that war. Now, earlier I did speak with the Israeli army, and again, regarding the incident on Thursday morning, their comment was no comment.
All right, let's get the thoughts now of Jamal Wakim, who's a professor of history and international relations at Lebanese University in Beirut. Professor Wakim, welcome to RT International. Appreciate you coming on the show. What do you make so far of the relative silence from Israel on this? Not to either confirm it or deny it, just that hint from the intelligence minister.
I believe that the Israelis are responsible for the attack on the Syrian airport, but at the same time I believe that they are trying to avoid any reaction from the Russians, because in a previous attack on Syria, the Israeli ambassador to Moscow was summoned by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs, and was warned directly of repeating such acts. So that's why I believe that this act was taken by the Israelis, but they didn't claim responsibility for it in the open. And this is consistent with the with the Israeli attempt to escalate the tension in southern Syria. They are backed by the United States, who were stalled by the intransigent position of Russia, especially after the latest attack, American attack against the Shu'arat airport. So that's why I believe that the Americans are delegating the mission to the Israelis to escalate tension in southern Syria in preparation for an attempt to reshuffle the balance of power in that country to the favor of the Americans and their allies.
And what difference will all this make to the dynamic of the conflict in Syria if Israel gets more involved?
If Israel gets more involved, this comes, it will get involved in the southern part of Syria, south of Damascus, and we know very well that Damascus is the bastion of the regime. It's the major pillar of Syria and of the regime in Syria. So if it gets jeopardized, the whole stability of the country will be shaken. So that's why the attempt or the attack, the Israeli attack on Syria, comes at a time when there are maneuvers among over 20 countries going on now in Jordan, and we know that Jordan is coordinating its moves with the Americans. So any destabilization of Syria in the near future will come through the southern part of Syria, especially at a time when northern Syria was stabilized according to along a status quo, where the eastern part is under the American control, and some parts of the western part of Syria are under the Turkish control. So now that the Russians proved very intransigent in supporting the Syrians, the Americans are shifting their attention to the southern part of Syria by giving the Israelis a green light to act freely in that part and direct attacks against the Syrian army and against Hezbollah. And this might not be limited to southern Syria, but it might extend to southern Lebanon also.
Yeah, and we'll maybe know in the next day or so whether Israel was actually behind the explosions at Damascus airport. For now, though, Professor Wakim, I really appreciate you coming on the programme. Thanks for your insight this afternoon.